The vultures circled lower as Ayanna pressed her back against the Red Canyon wall, her trembling fingers clutching the meager water pouch they'd left her. 3 days had passed since her own people, the Kiowa who had raised her, loved her, called. Her daughter had walked away without looking back, their footsteps echoing off the stone until only silence remained. "Barren woman brings curse," Elder Mop had declared, his weathered face carved with disappointment as harsh as the desert. "Wind. The spirits have spoken through 5 winters of empty womb. The tribe cannot carry what the earth rejects." Ayanna had not begged. Pride, perhaps the only thing she had left, kept her spine straight as they departed with their horses and travois, leaving her with nothing but a worn blanket, stale pemmican that would last 2 days at most, and the crushing weight of failure that had followed her since her 16th winter when other girls. Her age began swelling with new life. Now at 23, she was alone in the Llano Estacado's most unforgiving canyon, where even the Comanche raiders feared to venture. The rock formations twisted like ancient spirits frozen in stone, and the wind carried whispers that sounded almost human in their loneliness. Her water was nearly gone. The pemmican had crumbled to dust in her dry mouth yesterday. Ayanna knew. The signs her body was already beginning the slow surrender that meant death would come with the next sunrise. Maybe 2 if she was unlucky. She had seen it before, during the hungry years when winter stretched too long and game grew scarce. But as the sun began its descent toward the canyon rim, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold, something moved in the shadows across the narrow valley floor. Not the scuttle of a lizard or the slither of a snake, but something massive and deliberate. Ayanna's heart hammered against her ribs as the figure emerged from behind a pillar of stone. A man, but larger than any man she had ever seen, easily 7 feet tall with shoulders that could span a doorway. His skin was bronzed by sun and wind, marked with the distinctive paint and scars of a Comanche warrior, but his size spoke of something else entirely. Something the old women whispered about in winter lodges when the children had fallen asleep. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step calculated and silent despite his massive frame. Across his broad chest, white and red paint formed symbols she recognized as marks of a war chief. But beneath the ceremonial decoration, she could see scars that told stories of battles no ordinary man could have survived. When his eyes found hers across the canyon floor, Ayanna felt her breath catch. They were not the dark brown of her people, or even the deep black of most Comanche, but a startling pale green, like spring water over river stones. Eyes that seemed to see straight through flesh and bone to whatever lay beneath. He stopped, perhaps 50 paces away, studying her with the patient intensity of a hunter evaluating prey. But there was something else in that gaze, a recognition that made her skin prickle with awareness she couldn't name. "You are far from your people, Kiowa." "Woman," he said, his voice carrying easily across the space between them despite its quiet tone. He spoke her language perfectly, without the accent that marked most Comanche tongues. Ayanna lifted her chin, meeting those strange pale eyes directly. "My people are far from me," she corrected, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "There is a difference." Something that might have been approval flickered across his broad features. He took a step closer, and she could see now that he carried weapons enough to outfit 3 warriors, a bow that looked like it required tremendous strength to draw, a war club that seemed more suited to breaking boulders than skulls, and knives that gleamed with edges sharp enough to split hairs. "They left you here to die," he observed, not as a question but as a statement of fact. "They left me here to find my own path to the spirit world," Ayanna replied, choosing her words carefully. Even facing death, she would not shame her people. Before a traditional enemy, no matter how they had wronged her, the giant Comanche's expression shifted, revealing something like respect. "And what if I told you there was another path?" Ayana's laugh came out cracked and bitter, like breaking pottery. What path could there be for one the spirits have marked as cursed? Even now, death circles above us. She gestured weakly toward the vultures that had grown bolder, descending to perch on nearby ledges. The massive warrior, for that's clearly what he was, tilted his head with curiosity rather than offense. The spirits mark many things, woman. Sometimes what one people call curse, another calls gift. He moved closer, each step measured and unthreatening despite his imposing size. I am Nahali of the Antelope Horn Band, war chief, horse taker, storm walker. And I have been searching these canyons for 3 moons. Searching for what? The question slipped out before Ayana could stop herself. For you? The words hit her like a physical blow. She pressed herself harder against the canyon wall, ignoring the sharp stone that bit into her shoulder blades. That's impossible. You don't even know who I am. Nahali crouched down, bringing his massive frame closer to her eye level, though he remained respectfully distant. Up close, she could see that his unusual size wasn't the soft bulk of a man who ate too much, but the hard-earned muscle of someone who had wrestled bears and lived to tell about it. His hands, when he rested them on his knees, were easily twice the size of any normal man's. 3 moons ago, I had a vision, he began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. The spirit of the great buffalo came to me in dreams, showing me a woman abandoned by her own people, cast into the canyon of echoes. A woman whose womb the earth had sealed not as punishment, but as protection. Ayana's heart stuttered. Protection. From what? From carrying children who would be too large for any normal woman to bear safely. His pale green eyes held hers steadily. The spirits knew what was coming. They prepared you for me as they prepared me for you. The logical part. Of her mind, the part trained from childhood to be practical and skeptical of men's promises, wanted to scoff. But something deeper, some instinct that had kept her alive these past 3 days despite everything, recognized truth in his words. She had always been different. Taller than most women, stronger, able to endure hardships that felled others. Even her monthly bleeding had been strange irregular, sometimes absent for seasons at a time, as if her body followed different rules. You're asking me to believe that the greatest shame of my life was actually the spirits preparing me for marriage to a stranger? Nahali's expression gentled, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of the man beneath the fearsome warrior. I'm asking you to consider that what your people saw as failure, mine might see as a perfect match. Among my band, size matters. My children will need a mother strong enough to carry them, wise enough to teach them, brave enough to stand beside a war chief who makes enemies simply by existing. He reached slowly into a leather pouch at his side, withdrawing a bundle wrapped in soft doeskin. I brought gifts, as tradition demands, but first, let me offer what you need most. The bundle revealed dried meat that made her mouth water instantly, a full water skin that sloshed invitingly, and strips of pemmican studded with berries and nuts, food that could sustain her for weeks. He set them carefully within her reach but didn't push them toward her, leaving the choice entirely hers. Eat, he said simply. Drink, regain your strength. Then decide whether you wish to hear my full proposal or whether you prefer I leave you to the path your people chose. Ayana stared at the food, her stomach cramping with desperate hunger. But accepting it would mean accepting obligation, and she had learned the hard way how quickly obligations could become chains. What would you ask of me in return? Partnership. Nahali replied without hesitation. Not servitude. Among the Comanche, a war chief's wife has her own power, her own voice. She is not a possession but a partner in building something larger than either could achieve alone. And if I cannot give you the children you seek? If the spirits have truly sealed my womb permanently? His smile was slow and warm, transforming his severe features entirely. Then we will build our legacy in other ways. There are always orphans who need parents, young warriors who need mentors, wisdom to be passed down through deed rather than blood. The spirits rarely give simple gifts, Ayana of the Kiowa. They prefer complex ones that require courage to unwrap. Her name from his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. How do you know what I'm called? The buffalo spirit whispered many things during those 3 moons of dreams. Your name, your face. The sound of your laughter when you're truly happy, though I suspect it has been many seasons since anyone heard that music. Despite everything, her exhaustion, her fear, her ingrained caution, Ayana felt something crack open inside her chest. Hope, perhaps? Or maybe just the desperate hunger for connection that came from too many nights, sleeping alone under an indifferent sky. She reached for the water skin. The water was sweet and cool, tasting of mountain springs and carrying the faint mineral tang that spoke of deep, clean sources. As Ayana drank, she watched Nahali over the rim of the skin, studying his face for any sign of deception or calculation. But he simply waited, patient as stone, while she satisfied her body's desperate needs. The dried meat was elk, perfectly seasoned with wild herbs she recognized from her grandmother's cooking. Each bite brought strength flowing back into her limbs, and with it, the return of her natural caution. Men did not simply appear in impossible places with perfect timing and generous hearts. There had to be more to this story. Tell me about this vision, she said between bites, settling herself more comfortably against the canyon wall. Everything. If you want me to consider this proposal, I need to understand what I'm truly being offered. Nahali nodded approvingly, as if her wariness pleased rather than offended him. The buffalo came to me during the sun dance when I had been hanging from the sacred pole for 2 days and nights. My body was beyond pain, beyond time, and that's when the spirit world opened. He settled cross-legged on the sand, his movements graceful despite his enormous frame. The great buffalo showed me my future wife, but not in the way I expected. I saw you first as a child, taller than your playmates, always chosen last for women's games because your hands were better suited to hunting than beadwork. Then, as a young woman, watching your friends marry while you remained alone, season after season. Ayana's breath caught. He was describing her life with an accuracy that made her skin prickle with unease. No one could know these details unless— You've been watching me, she accused, her hand instinctively moving toward the small knife at her belt. Though what good it would do against a giant, she couldn't imagine. Never, Nahali said firmly. I saw you in visions, not in life. The buffalo showed me your pain, your shame, your endless wondering what you had done to displease the spirits. But then it showed me the truth that every disappointment was preparation. Your strength grew while other women learned only softness. Your survival skills sharpened while they learned only to depend on others. Your heart learned to endure isolation, which meant it could bear the unique challenges of being my wife. And what challenges would those be, exactly? His expression grew serious, almost grim. I am not a normal man, Ayana. My size makes me valuable as a warrior but dangerous as a mate. 3 women of my own people tried to marry me. The first 2 died in childbirth, carrying babies too large for their bodies. The third was wise enough to leave before we could create that tragedy again. The honesty in his words hit her like a physical blow. Here was the heart of it, not romance or destiny, but practical necessity wrapped in spiritual justification. So you need me because I'm the only woman you found who might survive bearing your children. I need you because you're the only woman I found who might be my equal, he corrected quietly. Yes, your body was made to carry larger children. Safely, the buffalo spirit showed me this clearly. But more than that, Your mind was trained by hardship to think like a leader, not a follower. Your heart was tempered by rejection to value genuine partnership over pretty words and empty promises. Ayanna studied his face, searching for the lies she expected to find. Instead, she saw something that made her chest tight with unexpected emotion, loneliness. This giant warrior, this legendary figure who could probably take on 10 normal men and win, was as isolated by his nature as she had been by hers. "The women who died," she said slowly, "did you love them?" "I cared for them. I wanted to protect them, provide for them, honor them as wives deserve to be honored." "But love?" He was quiet for a long moment, his strange pale eyes distant. "I think true love requires understanding, and they could never understand what it meant to be so different from everyone around you. They saw my size as strength to lean on, not burden to share." "And you think I would understand?" "I think you would understand better than anyone." His gaze returned to hers, direct and unflinching. "I think you know what it's like to walk through life feeling like you were made wrong, when actually you were made exactly right for a purpose no one else could see." The words resonated in places she hadn't even known were still tender. All her life, she had felt like a mistake too tall, too strong, too independent, too everything that women weren't supposed to be. But what if he was right? What if those differences weren't flaws but preparation? "If I agreed," she said carefully, "what would happen next?" "We would travel to my winter camp where you would meet my people and they would meet you. If both sides find the match acceptable, we would be married according to both Kiowa and Comanche custom. Your traditions and mine braided together like a strong rope. And if your people find me unacceptable?" Nahali's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then they'll have to explain their objections to me personally. And I am not known for my patience with those who question my judgment in important matters." Despite everything, Ayanna found herself almost smiling. Almost. "You're very sure of yourself. I'm sure of what the spirits showed me. The rest we'll discover together." She looked around the canyon that had been meant as her tomb, then back at this impossible man who claimed the spirits had led him to her. The smart thing would be to refuse, to thank him for the food and water and ask him to leave her in peace. The safe thing would be to die here alone rather than risk the kind of devastating disappointment that could come from hoping too much. But Ayanna had never been particularly smart or safe. "I'll come with you," she said, then quickly held up a hand as his face lit up. "To meet your people, to see this winter camp, to learn more about these visions that supposedly make us destined for each other, but I make no promises beyond that." Nahali's grin was like sunrise breaking over the canyon rim. "No promises beyond that," he agreed solemnly. Then he rose to his feet, extending one massive hand toward her. "Shall we begin the journey, Ayanna of the Kiowa? Your new life is waiting." Nahali's horse was unlike any animal Ayanna had ever seen, a massive black stallion that stood at least 18 hands high, with the muscle and bone structure to carry a rider of impossible size. The beast watched her approach with intelligent, dark eyes, snorting once before lowering his great head in what seemed like approval. "His name is Tempest," Nahali explained, running one huge hand along the stallion's neck with obvious affection. "He was born the same night the buffalo spirit first came to me in dreams. Another gift from the spirits, I think." Ayanna had been riding since childhood, but mounting behind Nahali required assistance from his linked hands. Even sitting on the broad back of the giant horse, she felt dwarfed by her companion's size. His presence was warm and solid in front of her, and she found herself having to resist the urge to lean into that strength. As they rode through the winding canyon passages, Nahali spoke of his people, the antelope horn band of the Comanche, renowned for their horse breeding and their fierce independence even among the already independent Comanche tribes. His voice carried easily over the rhythm of Tempest's hooves, and Ayana found herself drawn into the stories despite her determination to remain aloof. "My grandfather was the first giant in our family line," he explained as they climbed a narrow trail that offered glimpses of the vast prairie beyond. He stood 7.5 feet tall and could wrestle a buffalo to the ground with his bare hands, but he married a normal-sized woman, and their children were all of regular height. The giant blood skipped my father entirely, then showed up in me stronger than ever. "How tall are you exactly?" Ayana asked, curious despite herself. 7 feet and 4 finger widths. "Still growing, according to my grandmother, though I hope she's wrong. Finding clothes and weapons is already difficult enough." Ayana tried to imagine what it would be like to go through life so dramatically different from everyone around you. At least her differences had been subtle enough that she could blend in most of the time. Nahali's very presence announced his otherness to anyone who looked at him. "It must have been lonely," she said quietly. She felt rather than saw his slight smile. "Very lonely. Until 3 moons ago, when the buffalo spirit showed me there was someone else in the world who understood what it meant to be set apart by the very things that were supposed to make you valuable." They made camp that evening in a sheltered grove, beside a clear stream. Nahali proved to be surprisingly domestic for such a fearsome warrior, efficiently gathering firewood and preparing their meal while Ayana tended to Tempest. The horse seemed to accept her readily, allowing her to brush his coat and check his hooves with the easy familiarity of someone raised around horses. As they sat beside the fire sharing roasted rabbit and wild onions, Ayana found herself studying Nahali's face in the flickering light. The ceremonial paint had long since worn away, revealing features that were undeniably handsome despite or perhaps because of their bold scale. His jaw was strong enough to break rocks, his cheekbones sharp as blades, and those unusual pale green eyes held depths that spoke of intelligence and humor alongside the expected warrior's fierceness. "May I ask you something personal?" she said as they finished eating. "Everything about this situation is personal," he replied with amusement. "Ask whatever you wish. The women who died, did they know beforehand about the danger?" Nahali's expression grew somber. "The first didn't. None of us understood the risks then, but the second knew and chose to try anyway. She believed love could overcome anything, including the laws of nature." "And you let her?" "I was young and foolish enough to believe it too." His voice carried old pain, carefully controlled but still present. "Her death taught me that some risks are too great to take, no matter how much you want something to work." Ayana nodded slowly, understanding more than he probably realized. "That's why you waited for the vision. Why you needed the spirits to show you a safer path." "Partly, yes. But also because I learned that taking what you want without considering the cost to others is the behavior of a selfish child, not a man worthy of leading others." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to glowing embers. Finally, Ayana spoke again. "Tell me about your dreams of me. The specific details the buffalo spirit showed you." Nahali was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and thoughtful. "I saw you teaching children to track deer through difficult terrain, though they weren't your children by blood. I saw you standing beside me in council meetings, offering advice that changed the course of important decisions. I saw you bearing a son who grew to be even taller than his father, and a daughter whose strength became legendary among all the Plains tribes." Ayana's breath caught. "You saw children, specifically?" "2, possibly 3. The visions weren't always clear about numbers. But I saw you holding babies that were large, but not impossibly so, and I saw them growing into adults who inherited the best qualities from both their parents." His pale eyes found hers across the dying fire. The buffalo spirit was very clear. On one point, our union would not repeat the tragedies of my past marriages. It would create something entirely new. And you trust these visions completely? Nahali's smile was rueful. I trust them enough to search 3 moons for a woman I'd never met in country where most men fear to travel alone. Trust them enough to stake my future happiness on the possibility that the spirits know better than I do what I need. But not enough to assume I'll simply go along with the plan because the spirits supposedly decreed it. No, he agreed. The spirits can arrange for 2 people to meet. They can even show us that we're compatible in ways that matter. But they can't force love, respect, or genuine partnership. Those things we have to build ourselves, day by day, choice by choice. Ayanna studied his face in the firelight, seeing sincerity there but also something else, a patient determination that spoke of a man willing to work for what he wanted rather than simply take it. It was an attractive quality in anyone, but especially in someone with the physical power to simply overwhelm opposition if he chose. What happens if we reach your camp and I decide this isn't the path I want to take? Then I escort you safely to wherever you do want to go, with supplies. Enough to ensure your survival and my blessing for whatever future you choose to build. Even though the spirits supposedly showed you we're meant to be together, Nahali's expression grew serious. Even then. The spirits may know what's possible, Ayanna, but they can't make anyone choose happiness. That decision has to come from the heart, not from duty or desperation or even divine instruction. She nodded slowly, feeling something that might have been relief settling in her chest. Whatever else this giant warrior might be, he wasn't a man who would force his will on others simply because he had the power to do so. That alone made him different from most men she had known. Then let's continue this journey, she said quietly, and see what the spirits have really prepared for us. 3 days of travel brought them to the edge of a vast valley where the Antelope Horn Band had made their winter camp. Ayanna's first glimpse of the settlement took her breath away, not because of its size, though it was substantial, but because of the sheer magnificence of the horses that grazed in herds around the lodges. These weren't ordinary plains ponies. These animals were clearly the result of generations of careful breeding, each one tall and strong and swift-looking. Many stood 16 hands or more, with the deep chests and powerful hindquarters of horses bred for both speed and endurance. She had never seen their equal, not even among the wealthy traders who occasionally visited her old village. My people's wealth, Nahali explained, following her gaze with obvious pride. We trade these horses as far south as Mexico and as far east as the Great River. A single antelope horn stallion can buy enough goods to supply a family for 2 seasons. As they rode closer, Ayanna noticed other differences between this band and her own people. The lodges were larger than typical, with extra-wide entrance flaps that would accommodate someone of Nahali's unusual size. The people themselves seemed taller on average than most plains tribes, and she saw several men who, while not giants, like Nahali, stood well above 6 feet with the broad shoulders and heavy bones of their bloodline. But it was the women who surprised her most. Rather than showing fear or hostility toward a Kiowa stranger, they watched her approach with frank curiosity and something that looked almost like relief. Several of them were unusually tall themselves, and she realized that this band had been shaped not just by the need to breed exceptional horses, but by the challenge of finding wives who could bear the large children that seemed common among them. Nahali returns, called a voice from the camp's edge, and he brings a guest. Within moments, they were surrounded by people eager to welcome their war chief home. Nahali dismounted first, then lifted Ayanna down with careful courtesy. The ease with which he handled her weight, she was not a small woman by any standard, demonstrated the incredible strength hidden beneath his controlled manner. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd, her silver hair braided with beads and feathers that marked her as someone of high status. Despite her age, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed, and when she looked at Ayanna, her dark eyes were sharp with evaluation. "So," she said in heavily accented but understandable, "Kiowa, you are the woman my grandson saw in his buffalo dreams." "I am Ayanna of the Kiowa," she replied carefully, offering the respectful greeting appropriate for addressing an elder. "And you are?" "I am Itzel, grandmother to this overgrown fool and medicine woman of the Antelope Horn people. I have been waiting 3 moons to meet the woman who might finally make him stop brooding like a lovesick boy." Despite her nervousness, Ayanna couldn't help smiling at the dry humor in the old woman's voice. Nahali, for his part, looked slightly embarrassed, which only made him more endearing. "Grandmother," he protested mildly, "perhaps you could allow Ayanna to rest from our journey before you begin evaluating her for suitability?" Itzel's laugh was sharp as breaking twigs. "Grandson, I have been evaluating her since before you lifted her from that horse, and what I see pleases me greatly." Her keen gaze returned to Ayanna. "You have the height for bearing large children safely, the strength for surviving the hardships that come with marrying a war chief, and the intelligence to manage a household where nothing is quite normal size. More importantly, you have the spine to travel 3 days with my grandson without either killing him or falling helplessly in love with him." "How can you tell that?" Ayanna asked, genuinely curious. "Because you're still asking questions instead of simpering or cowering. The first suggests you're thinking for yourself. The second suggests you're not easily intimidated." Itzel's smile was approving. "Both qualities will serve you well in this family." Over the following days, Ayanna found herself gradually integrated into the daily life of the band. The women, rather than treating her as an outsider, seemed eager to share their knowledge and skills. She learned that many of them had also been considered unmarriageable in their birth tribes, too tall, too strong, too independent, before finding acceptance among the Antelope Horn people. "We collect misfits," explained Siwa, a woman nearly as tall as Ayanna herself, who had married one of Nahali's cousins. "Women who don't fit elsewhere often fit perfectly here, where different is considered valuable rather than strange." But it was her time spent with Nahali himself that proved most revealing. Away from the pressures of courtship and surrounded by his own people, she saw sides of him that had been hidden during their journey. She watched him settle disputes with wisdom and patience, saw him teaching young warriors with endless attention to detail, observed him caring for sick horses with gentle hands that seemed impossibly large for such delicate work. "He's not what I expected," she admitted to Itzel one evening as they worked together preparing medicine bundles. "What did you expect?" "Someone more commanding, I suppose, more demanding. Most war chiefs I've known have been proud men who expected others to bend to their will." Itzel nodded thoughtfully. Nahali learned early that his size made people either fear him or try to use him. Fear makes for poor leadership, and being used makes for bitter hearts. So he became the kind of man others choose to follow rather than one they're forced to obey. "The women who died, how did the band react to those losses?" The old woman's expression grew sad. "Badly. Many blamed him, said he was cursed to kill any woman who loved him. Others said he should marry outside the Comanche entirely, find some white woman or Mexican who might be built differently." The young men began to whisper that maybe giants shouldn't try to have children at all. And what did you think? I thought the spirits were teaching him a hard lesson about the difference between want and need, between forcing solutions and waiting for the right path to reveal itself. Itzel's dark eyes found Ayanna's. "I also thought they were preparing him to properly value the right woman when she finally appeared." That night, as Ayanna lay in the guest lodge listening to the sounds of the sleeping camp, She found herself thinking about the life she might build here, not the desperate scrambling for acceptance she had known among her birth people, but genuine partnership with someone who understood what it meant to be different. It was more than she had ever dared hope for, which made it both precious and terrifying. The next morning, Nahali found her beside the horse corrals, watching the magnificent animals that were his people's pride and livelihood. "Have you decided?" he asked quietly, coming to stand beside her at the wooden fence. Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, watching Amare nuzzle her foal, a colt that was already nearly as large as a full-grown pony from other tribes. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'm ready to find out if the buffalo spirit knew what it was talking about." Nahali's smile was brighter than the morning sun. "Then let's ask Itzel to begin preparing the wedding ceremony. I have a feeling it's going to be quite a celebration." The wedding preparations took on the complexity of a military campaign, with Itzel commanding an army of women who seemed determined to create a ceremony worthy of legend. Ayanna found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity that was both overwhelming and oddly comforting. After years of being an outsider, it was strange but wonderful to be the focus of so much positive attention. "Both traditions must be honored," Itzel declared on the third morning of preparations. Kiowa and Comanche customs woven together like threads in a strong blanket. The spirits brought you together across tribal boundaries, so the ceremony itself must cross those same boundaries. Messengers had been dispatched to invite delegations from neighboring bands, and to Ayanna's amazement, one had even been sent to find her birth people. "They abandoned you shamefully," Nahali explained when she questioned this decision, "but they are still your blood family. If any wish to witness your happiness and perhaps learn from their mistake, they should have that opportunity." The wedding dress alone was a masterpiece of collaborative artistry. She couldn't bear children, so her tribe left her in the canyon until a giant Comanche married her.